welcome once again to Sid Caudle, who's about to go on his holes. No, it's not strictly that, but Florida at this time of the year, there's worse places to go, Sid. But it's a conference, isn't it?
Yes, I'm going to a conference with Rodney Howard-Brown, which is from next Sunday to the Sunday afterwards, 8 days. But I'm going to be there for 2 days before the conference starts and staying for 2 days afterwards before I fly back. So, yeah, we're staying in a nice hotel, nice swimming pool. So, and the conference sessions are like 9:30 in the morning and 7:30 at night. So you do have time every day. And if it's anything like last time, there were about 3 sessions where I didn't actually go in the morning. So, let's just stay by the pool. So,
Are you
yeah,
speaking there?
no, I'm not speaking. No, it's he doesn't. He very rarely invites anyone much to speak other than church leaders that are very close to him. But
Hmm.
it's mostly just Rodney Howard-Brown speaking.
Well, there you go. Have a good time. Listen, we're not having a good time in UK, perhaps in America at the moment as well. Times are changing,
Mm,
literally. But I'm thinking of certain things that never change. The Labour Party are in power, the socialists, and boy, do they have a reputation of looking after their buddies.
mm,
And this government, are on steroids. My
mm,
goodness me, the civil servants are loving it. They've got a 7.7% pay rise. Everybody else has got half that. They've got a nice fat pension awaiting for them, and the pay rise is completely wrong. That we always think of the train drivers and the doctors getting exactly what they wanted because it's a Labour government. But this is above and beyond, I think.
Yes, you see, it's quite interesting because the reality should be with a large number of government functions being franchised out. I mean, we've got this enormous additional spending on quangos, an extra 85 billion. And a lot of these quangos are carrying out government functions. It's what they are, quasi-government bodies. And then we've also got the increased efficiency of computer use and these days even AI use. So you ought to be able to do the civil service functions far more efficiently than you could when it was a matter of a civil servant who had to read everything and make their own judgments. These days, you can use computers to do a lot of the research for you. It should be much easier. So, what we should be finding is that there are drastic cuts in the civil service, drastic cuts in the numbers, drastic cuts in the offices, and all the functions are being carried out much more efficiently and much more cheaply with fewer people. That's what we ought to be finding. But the fact that we're finding a drastic increase in the number of quangos plus a drastic increase in the number of civil servants shows that there's something going terribly wrong. And frankly, even though Reform are saying we're going to cut the civil service, we're going to save 5 billion, that's 5 billion is nowhere near enough. We should be saving more like 100 billion across government, at least. I mean, we've actually said we should be saving 200 billion, including all the increasing quangos that's going on. And that would only take us back to the level that we were at around about 2010 in real terms, not in money terms, but in real terms after allowing for inflation. Saving 200 billion only takes us back to that level. And we should be cutting, not even just equal to 2010.
Right, the totals are now 6.2 million people working for the government. That includes the new 88,000. That is enormous. And as you said, we've got to do something about it. We can't afford the luxury. No, it's a luxury. It's not only the fact that there's too many civil servants, is that they are not producing anything for the real economy. They'll deny that, but they're not. Quite the reverse. They're imposing trivial, in the most case, laws and regimes that each employer has to cooperate with, that is costing the employer lots of extra money for nothing, just for tick boxing.
Yeah, so the way to handle this, because you can't just get rid of civil servants because they've all got contracts and so on and so forth. So the way to handle this is literally to decide what functions you no longer wish and make people redundant, which is basically what happens or has happened in the past in industry. So, for instance, you say we no longer want to chase after net zero. That's no longer a function we want. So anyone involved in net zero or anyone involved in reducing carbon emissions, we're going to make redundant because we no longer want those functions in government. And you can do that. You can look at that across government, but across government, you've literally got to say this function is we're no longer using. So you can also do a certain amount with saying, we're going to freeze appointments. We're no longer appointing anyone to new roles. There'll be no new appointments. You can do that. But it has to be done correctly. You can't just, we're going to reduce the numbers and we're going to get rid of anyone we don't want because you'll then have a numerous number of court cases. It's like so you've got to be careful.
Sid, I'm going to go to what life is like in Britain, and it's not a jolly time for most people. It is for the civil servants, of course. But if you look at the facts, that we have them, we've got the perfect storm. People are now not renewing their contracts, whether they're working as self-employed. There's a desperate need, in fact, for work from certain sectors. This has all been brought about with the national insurance tax, the extra 2%, the minimum wage, the silly laws about expecting pubs and restaurants to survive when they've been asked to pay an extra 100,000 rates, which again is another U-turn that is waiting to happen. Things are in an absolute mess, and it's stretching to your health. There's never been so many people that are staying indoors, not going out meeting other people. And this has been traced back to a lot of mental health conditions. Pubs. Today, the report's been published. 542 public houses shut this last 12 months. And it will only carry on. Rearranging the deck chairs again, trying to paint a good picture. You can't, Sid. This is a government responsibility. The town centres are dying. Important industries are dying, and they do nothing about it. They work on a socialist philosophy, not in the real world.
Well, yes. I mean, as far as town centres are concerned, we've been saying for more than 10 years now that, well, first of all, we said they need to halve commercial rates for shopping centres. And now we've said that we found additional money and we need to get rid of commercial rates on shops altogether. Now, the reason for that is, well, we would replace it with a turnover tax. So every business will pay 5% turnover in tax. And whether you buy online or whether you buy in a shop, you pay the same tax. Now, at the moment, if you buy online, you pay significantly less tax than if you buy in a shop. Now, so that's what's causing the demise of the shops. And it's wrong, frankly. It's absolutely wrong. Now, we're not going to stop people buying online. Obviously, we're not going to say, oh, we're going to cancel all this online shopping. We're going to force people to go out and physically shop. I mean, we're not going to do that. But we are going to say you pay the same tax if you buy online if you buy in a shop because it's only fair. And that's what would revive the shops. Now, from my perspective, the main social contact with other people which I have is through the church. I mean, I enjoy going to church every Sunday, and we have church activities elsewhere during the week, and I have church meetings or CPA meetings, whatever, of some sort, which go on Zoom on a regular basis. So, and that's the sort of social contact which, frankly, I would like everyone to have. It's not particularly healthy, frankly, to be going and filling yourself with alcohol in a pub. because what often happens is, particularly men, but it can happen to women as well. But they can go and spend their day at work and then go down to the pub after work and have several pints, and then they find a lot of their earnings have gone in alcohol. And if they stay too long, they then arrive at home drunk, and it's not particularly pleasant for the family. So it's not only a matter of going out, it's also a matter of where you're going and what you're doing. And sport, of course, also is very enjoyable and very healthy, and got no problem at all with people going and watching sport and engaging with other people on that basis. I don't think people, frankly, need to go to work physically in order to have social contact and social life. I mean, there's other ways of doing it, and certainly hobbies, recreation, and especially church is very healthy to do outside of work.
Interesting. So maybe you're glad that the new booze laws, not even allowed to have a pint or a big glass of wine because you're over the limit. You will approve of that, will you?
Well, I know that they're trying to reduce the drink driving limit. I don't know. I mean, to be quite honest with you, if people are competent to drive, they should be allowed to drive. I mean, I don't think reducing the limit is necessarily the right approach. I mean, I think that's going to stop perfectly healthy recreational drinkers. But certainly, people have got to be careful how much they drink, and that should be applying across the board.
Well, I remember the days when if you go out to a pub, you take somebody there that's driving and will not drink alcohol. Problem solved.
Well, yes, I mean, obviously that's good. I mean, yeah, I mean, but the key thing is discipline. You see, in our society, in the last century, our society, or especially the first half of the last century, our society was very disciplined, partly because of the wars, because I guess during the wars you had to be extremely disciplined, but that discipline carried on after the wars. People were naturally very disciplined because they had to be during that period. But it was also a matter of moral principle too. Moral principles were, the husband earned money for his family and behaved responsibly towards his family, and the wife was, in the last century more focused on probably looking after children, but then also started to work as well. I'm not saying that a wife should be looking after the children, but I'm saying there should be discipline, there should be responsibility, and everyone should be accepting their responsibility. I'm afraid in our current society, discipline is something which has increasingly gone out of the window. And but it shouldn't be the matter of the state steps in and then forces people to do this or to do that. It should be, we should have enough principle about us to say, I don't just go out and get drunk and then drive home and have an accident because I behaved irresponsibly. People have got to behave responsibly without the state stepping in all the time.
Right, let's go to the farmers. I've got a couple of stats here about the farmers. Last year, 500 million inheritance tax. That was what the government wanted from the farmers. They've done half a U-turn, not a whole U-turn, which is regretful. And say, well, 2 million better than before. Maybe some farmers will not commit suicide as they tragically have. But I'm going to compare that with 536 million. That's what we paid in overseas aid to farmers overseas. Interesting, isn't it? Competition to our own farmers. Problem solved again. Should we carry on with all this aid, Sid, when our own are suffering?
Well, frankly, I've got no problem with aid going to farms overseas. The problem I've got with overseas aid is when it's focused on climate change, as it frequently is. Some of our overseas aid is promoting abortion in Africa. some of our overseas aid is promoting same-sex marriage in the third world. I mean, it's not. If our overseas aid was only going to support farmers in the third world, I'd be saying, okay, that's fine. That's a good use of overseas aid. But frankly, there's so much on overseas aid which is misused. I mean, radically misused. Also, some of it's also going to promote Islam, overseas. It's like it's out of control, and it's so out of control that I believe we'd literally have to stop all overseas aid and literally start again and only give it to projects that are really useful and really purposeful. And if you think that that's a bit far-fetched, that's exactly what Donald Trump has done. And the grants that he's now giving are now 17% of the grants that were being given before he came into office, because he's found so much misuse of overseas aid. Of course, in his case, it was US aid, but there's so much misuse of US aid across the world, and so much of it's going to actually harmful things rather than useful things, that he's literally said we've got to stop and start again. I think it's exactly the same with UK aid.
Yeah. The other thing, while we're thinking about farmers, their campaign has been extraordinarily effective. Now, it's not only the farmers that are suffering with this awful inheritance tax situation, it's the rest of the businesses which have got to face this. And people have forgotten about this. And why are the businessmen's associations not doing what the farmers are doing? Blockading, bringing it to the public notice, getting on television. It's only the farmers that have got a bit of gumption. And it's happening again with the farmers because for 10 years, many of their products have not seen any wage or cost increase that they've provided for goods to supermarkets, as an example. They're receiving exactly the same after 10 years that the supermarkets were paying them a decade before. So they're having a protest about that. Now, that may yield something, it should do, because again, they're being cruelly treated.
Yeah, I'm afraid I believe there's something very insidious going on here, which I'm sorry if this sounds a bit extreme, but I think it's the reality that we have to face. I mean, you see, because there are governments all over the world that are attacking and undermining farmers. I mean, we've even had the position in Netherlands where they've even set up a farmers' party because the farmers were so under attack in Netherlands. And you think, what's going on? Why are they closing down farms and attacking farmers all over the world? And the answer appears to be that they're linking it to climate change because they say, oh, well, it's cows and animals that produce all this methane and whatever, and all this is responsible for climate change. So we've got to have fewer animals out in the fields. That's what they're saying. But what do they actually, if they remove all the animals from the field, what are we going to eat? Well, the answer appears to be processed food because they're trying increasingly to manufacture synthetic food. So they don't actually want us to be eating uh, beef from cows. They want us to be eating synthetic food that's manufactured in the laboratory. And why do they want us to be eating synthetic food? Why can't we eat? Well, it's partly they say climate change, but it's also so they want to control our diet. They want to control what we eat. So you see, if I'm eating a cow that's slaughtered by a farmer who's grown beef, who's reared beef cattle, then and gone to an abattoir and it's been killed and it's been then sent to a supermarket and I buy it from the supermarket. So the government have got no control over what I'm eating. They've got no control what goes in there. It's all decided by the farmer. They don't want the decisions of what we eat decided by farmers. They want decisions of what we eat decided by government. So that's why they're trying to control it all and attacking the farmers. And increasingly, they want to decide what goes into a supermarket and what we eat. That's the reality of what's going on. And I'm afraid as I say, people might think that's extreme, but look and see whether what I'm saying is correct or not, because I think increasingly you'll find that's exactly what's happening and what's going on.
It is about control in so many ways, Sid. I agree. Let's look at that a bit more closely and think of the definition of Islamophobia, which is being introduced again by the backdoor anti-free speech. There will be a protected number of people, 4 million if you want the figures, Islamic people in the United Kingdom, to the detriment of other religions, whether it be Christianity, whether it be any of the Indian religions, whether it be any philosophy, indeed. Why is Islam being protected? Now, I say this in the light of Birmingham and Aston Villa and what's gone on there. There was complete influence to the constabulary at the time, convincing them that it was too dangerous to hold that match if a Jew was anywhere near the stadium. Who is running our country? What is going on when the police force, and it's not just Birmingham, there are many other places in the country that the Islamic voice is got to be heard and listened to. Started 20 odd years ago with the grooming gangs. What is it about them? How have they got into positions of power?
Well, you've got to give it to the Muslims. I mean, the fact is that they're very good at lobbying. And they've done a lot of lobbying. What you were talking about with when Maccabi were visiting Aston Villa, it was some of the Labour MPs, plus I believe they've got an independent pro-Gaza MP there in Birmingham who was lobbying the police very strongly and basically telling lies, saying, oh, look at the violence that they cause in Amsterdam, Maccabi Tel Aviv, we need to protect the Muslim community, which is just utter nonsense. I mean, all the violence in Amsterdam with Maccabi Tel Aviv have been a deliberate attack by Arabs on and pro Hamas supporters on the Jewish supporters. I mean, the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans hadn't been violent at all, other than defending themselves. I mean, but they're trying to make out, oh, it's they're going to be dangerous to the Muslim community, so you've got to protect the Muslim community, and the only way to protect the Muslim community is to ban them from coming. That was their case, and the police, instead of saying, okay, we'll look into it, we'll establish the facts, and we'll get back to you, they just said, oh, okay, yeah, if you want us to ban them, we'll ban them. And when it's actually put under the spotlight, as it has been now in the Select Committee, when the Chief of Police of West Midlands Police has had to justify his decision, he can't justify it at all. It's obviously to be a completely false decision, and there was no danger whatever to the Muslim community from the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. It was just pure anti-Semitism. Now, you see, it is part of the Muslim religion that they want power. I mean, that's part of the religion. And they want power not only in the Middle East, they want power in the West. And it's become increasingly clear that all this immigration that's being experienced from Western countries throughout the world is part of a Muslim Hajj to make the West more Islamic. They're sent on a journey to achieve an end. You see, it's quite interesting. You see all these people turning up in Mexico, on the Mexico border, trying to get into the United States. Why were they going? Where are they all coming from? They're not fleeing anyone. They're just going in order to make America more Islamic. And of course, they've had the success now of having a Muslim mayor elected in New York, all part of the Hajj. They've had the success some time ago of having a Muslim mayor elected in London and in a number of other cities. And it's quite interesting what's going on now in reform, because you would think that reform now look as though they could well be forming the next government. So because they're now likely to form the next government, what's happening? All the Muslims are now trying to get into reform. I mean, we had Zia Yusuf there, and you think, oh well, Zia Yusuf's there. So that's sort of one individual, but he's maybe an outlier. Maybe he's just somebody, just one individual. But then you find suddenly, then they've now selected a Muslim candidate to stand against Sadiq Khan. So if we have a reform candidate elected to replace Sadiq Khan, it's going to be a Muslim. Yesterday, it was announced that Zawahiri, who was in 2022 standing to be leader of the Conservative Party, has now left the Conservative Party and has joined Reform. Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? Another Muslim. And he's somebody who said that he supports Erdogan and in Turkey, and Erdogan has been viciously anti-Israel and basically clearly an Islamic radical. So, and Swahili is saying that he supports him, supposedly from a moderate Muslim family, but showing support for Islamic radicalism, suddenly becoming a key member of Reform. So this entryism goes on all the time. And the fact that they can even do it in reform shows a major concern. And yesterday, frankly, somebody was actually saying to me, or in my, or it wasn't actually to me, but it was in my presence, you know, we thank God for the Christian People's Alliance, because here at least is one party where you have to be a Christian in order to stand as a candidate, and you have to be a Christian to be an officer of the party. So, frankly, if people want Christians running this country, they're not going to be able to do it voting for reform. They're going to have to vote for the Christian People's Alliance, and they're going to have to support us because that's the only party that actually said we are a Christian party and you can't be a Muslim in this party.
Yes, and I know that you made a visit to GB News on Friday, was it last week?
Yes.
And hopefully to get a bit of a platform there. Well, you got half a platform, didn't you?
Well, because I hadn't been invited onto the panel, even though I'd been promised, I resorted to applying to go in the audience. And they invited me to go in the audience on last Friday, on the 9th of January. And when I didn't know the format, but when I got there, I was told that there were set topics that they were going to discuss, and people in the audience could ask a question on one of the topics. So, by the way, I was literally the second person to arrive there, so I got there very early at the studio. And I got talking to somebody who was a regular, who was in the audience most weeks by apparently, and he told me what the format was. So I was basically warned. So they then came round with the topics. I grabbed hold of them, and then I got right in the front when we went downstairs from the reception. And the lady who was asking for people who would ask questions, I literally was said to her, "Yeah, I'll ask a question." I was the first person to say, yes, I'll ask a question. I looked at the topics, and the most interesting topic to me was the situation in Iran. So I said, yeah, I'll ask a question on the situation in Iran. So she put me down for that. And I was also right at the front when it got to going into the studio. So I got a seat on the front row, which was so I was there on the seat on the front row with my question to ask for Iran. That topic was geared for 10 o'clock. The show started at 9, but they had other topics coming on before. But that topic was going to be the first item at 10 o'clock. So they had a break between 9 and 10. We came back, and Patrick Christys was very good. I mean, I actually also met him before we went downstairs. He literally made an effort to come round and meet people that were going in the audience, and I introduced myself. And he said, "Oh, well, I look forward to hearing what you've got to say later." And so he knew who I was before the program started. And when it came to the topic, he said, "Right," he said, "I'm going to just hear from you for one of the panelists." He said, "Then I'm going to go to the gentleman in the audience." So he knew who he was asking to speak. So when he came to me, he just said, "Okay, what have you got to say on this?" He didn't actually say, "What is your question?" He literally said, "What have you got to say?" So he wanted my opinion. So I literally gave my opinion on what was going on, and basically said we're not getting to grips at all with the Muslim Brotherhood. We're not getting to grips with Islam. The Muslim Brotherhood is basically having a major say in Iran, but they also took over Egypt. And when they took over Egypt, Tony Blair said, "Fantastic, welcome the new government." And now, of course, they then started killing all Christians. And because they started killing all Christians, the army intervened and overthrew them. And they started taking a tough line with Muslim Brotherhood people. And one of the people that they've actually imprisoned was this guy Al Fatah, who then we have the British government desperately trying to get him freed from an Egyptian jail where he was put because of his activity for the Muslim Brotherhood. And Starmer gets him out of the Egyptian jail, gets him over to the UK and says, "What a fantastic achievement I've made in getting a Muslim Brotherhood who's been causing a lot of trouble in Egypt and now got him over to the UK where he can be free and do what he wants." I mean, this shows the extent to which we haven't got to grips with what's going on with extremist Islam. And I said this on the programme. And then I also said I want to ask the panel members, if these protesters in Iran are successful, we're going to have a new government that's pro-Israel in Iran. Would you welcome that? Well, they didn't actually answer that question, the panelists, but they did come back on the Muslim Brotherhood and say how much they agreed with what I was saying and how concerned they were. The Labour MP who was there, basically, he just said that he supported interfaith and he thought, Jews and Muslims and Christians should all just get along and there should be no distinction between any of them, which I didn't have a chance to come back on him, unfortunately, but at least I put my case forward, and before I spoke, by the way, I did actually say I'm Sid Cordell, I'm the leader of the Christian People's Alliance, before I made my statement. So, that's the nearest I've got to getting on GB News. But hopefully, I did actually email Patrick Christys afterwards, and I just hope that they will let me go on a panel at some stage.
There you go. From one subject to another, not aligned in some ways, but other ways, yes. There's been a phrase about town for quite a while now: go woke, go broke. My goodness me, has it certainly found a home with British Petroleum, BP. There was a revolution several years ago when all their service stations were painted green and there were flowers and all sorts of things. That's because they had a new boss at the time called Bernard Looney. That's an unfortunate name, but there you go. And that was in 2020. My goodness me, they've nearly gone bump. A company be like BP, yes, it's possible. They've got a female boss now, Mel O'Neill, and she's a good one apparently, and has turned her back on all this DEI, diversity, equality, and insanity. I say, of course, it's all part of where we are. And from insanity to inclusivity, which it really means, we welcome all the new electric cars. There's another problem for you. This very week, we've had a peculiar stat that 3 times more people die in an electric vehicle than a petrol or diesel vehicle. Now, this is one reason the insurance companies are not stupid, that they charge a heck of a lot more for an electric car, which you can't charge anyway in most service stations because it's broken. The whole thing's a disaster, and even our wonderful Chancellor of the Exchequer has realised that there's another U-turn, yet another one, and she's not going to be able to impose the rate per mile at the extent it is at the moment, which is between 1.5p per mile and 3p, depending on your vehicle. That's going to come down, people reckon. This is disjointed government from beginning to end. And when a big company like BP gets nearly turned over because of it, has stopped, again, government drilling in the North Sea, followed all the green woke, pathetic excuses, and nearly goes bump. Thank goodness they've got somebody else in charge before it's too late. Will we never learn, Sid?
Well, yes, of course, BP are a massive international company. In fact, when I was last in America, I noticed there were a lot of BP petrol stations there. And an American lady, I said, "Oh, it's great seeing British Petroleum here in America." She said, "Oh, I didn't even know it was BP stood for British Petroleum." But it's like, yeah, it's a massive international company, and I'm afraid the reality is that the fashion of going for electric vehicles is beginning to disappear because increasingly they're finding that it's easier for electric vehicles to catch fire. They're very expensive. If Rachel Reeves does introduce this pay per mile for electric vehicles, then they're going to be more expensive to run. You've got this ridiculous period where, if you've got an electric vehicle, you can only go about 75 miles, so you've got to stop for recharge on the way if you're going on a long journey, and then you've got to stop for recharge again on the way back, and the journey takes much longer. And there's an increasing number of people who've got electric vehicles who are saying, next time round, I'm not going to have an electric vehicle. I'm going to go back to a petrol vehicle or I'm going to go back to a hybrid vehicle. So I'm afraid I think if pure electric is going by the board. And there's no evidence either, really, that that having an electric vehicle has any effect whatsoever on the climate. I mean, there's no data that anyone can show that since they've introduced electric vehicles, we've now got any effect whatsoever, even a minimal of 0.1% effect, no effect whatsoever on the climate as a result of having electric vehicles.
No,
So, frankly,
perfectly.
the whole.
It's perfectly true. We have a hybrid vehicle, but it's hybrid, so we're not panicking between fill-ups of electricity like the all-electric vehicles you are.
Yeah.
Range anxiety, it's called. But we have to have it because the powers that be say you can't drive in Barcelona unless you have an EV or half an EV that we have. You can't drive in Madrid, and we need to, so we had to buy one. This is government again, an extreme socialist left-wing government that we have in Spain. And if you drive a modern car, there are so many electric compatibilities, let's call them, so many electric procedures you have to follow to even open the door. You've got to protect, which is maybe a good thing, the cyclist that's going there that doesn't look, and the driver of the car that doesn't look, and he opens his car in door in front of the cyclist and knocks him off. And you think that's a good idea. Well, it is until your car catches fire and you're locked in because the system takes over. There are certain times we cannot open the door.
Yeah.
Everybody's tooting behind you because you can't even move and put it in gear. The whole thing is a nonsense. No wonder 3 times as many people die in a modern car that's battery driven in one form or another. Something's got to be done for this madness, Sid.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid the reality is that, net zero is increasingly being seen as an utter waste of time. And it's incredibly expensive pursuing net zero. It's and frankly, it's about time we acknowledge that God created the world and God is in charge of the climate. It's this idea that somehow man controls the climate, and if we reduce carbon emissions, then we'll have a better environment. I mean, it's just simply untrue. And as I've said before, I think the whole reason it was dreamed up was because they wanted one world government. And if we're going to reduce carbon emissions, we can't do it one country on its own. So the whole world has to come together. And that's basically where the idea came from. And it's just got no scientific value whatsoever. That's the truth. And they pretended it has, of course. They pretended, oh, scientists say that we need to reduce carbon emissions. Scientists don't say it whatsoever. I mean, well, some scientists will, no doubt, if they're paid to say it. But there's an enormous number of scientists that are genuine scientists that say it's complete nonsense.
There are indeed, and it is, I'm fully convinced of that. Every time people say, oh, we've modelled this and that's going to be the result. Well, we had enough of that in COVID times, and that's been proved the case. Let's finish on some good notes before we come to footy. And Trump, well, you'll like this, Sid. He said to the UN, you've got 66 quangos all involved in climate change, and I'm not funding them anymore. I withdraw our funding. That's a positive mood, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as I've just talked earlier about the way he's got to grips with US overseas aid. Literally just scrapped it all completely and started again. And he's now got grants down to 17% of what they were before he came into office. But yeah, I mean, it's he's being very uh, cut and thrust. He's not allowing the civil servants to turn to him and say, "Oh, sorry, you can't do that." He's like, so, I am doing that. This is what I'm doing. And if you're not willing to implement what I'm saying, then you'll have to go. He's not afraid to say you're fired, because from his program. It's like that's the reality of it. It reminds me an awful lot of Margaret Thatcher, frankly, as the last leader that we had that actually had the guts to turn around to the civil service and say, no, you're wrong. We're not doing that. This is what we're doing. And obviously, the left wing absolutely hated her. They absolutely hated all her policies. But she had the guts to turn around and say to them, "Well, you may not agree with me now, but in time you'll see I'm right. This is what we've got to do." And that's what Trump is doing. It's like you might not agree with me now, but in time you'll see I'm right. This is what we've got to do. This is the way we've got to go. And enough with all the nonsense. Enough with the net zero nonsense. He's even told people that in the when they started the environment movement, they were saying that we're going to have another ice age. The whole thing is just a hoax. Trump has had the guts to say it exactly as it is. And God bless him. God bless him. I don't think we've got another leader on earth, frankly, that's got anywhere near to being where he is. The vast majority of leaders are controlled and doing what they're told to do. And certainly that's where Starmer is. I mean, the fact that Starmer's doing what he's told to do is being seen by all these U-turns because it's like, oh, this is what I want to do. No, you can't do that, Keir. You can't do that. So, okay, fair enough. Maybe you're right. I won't do that. It's just like he's just the guy's a complete fool. Trump is incredibly clever, and I really hope that when it comes to the midterms, people will give him their support, and he won't lose control of Congress.
Mm.
And I hope too that when it comes to the next election, somebody like J.D. Vance will be elected who supports his agenda, who carries on his agenda.
Yes, indeed. I don't know whether the follow. I said I had two items of good news. I don't know whether it's good news. You tell me. Stonewall, according to the pundits, is about to go bump.
Yeah.
They've got to be congratulated. They've certainly achieved what they started to aim for. In again, shed loads. It went as far as convincing thousands of companies in the United Kingdom to display a certificate saying how DEI they were as a company. And it cost the company £2,500. What a con! But they got away with it. But the money's gone. And people saw when they introduced the trans brigade, they've shot themselves in the foot here. This is not going to turn out well, and it isn't. We're back to the same boring thing is who is a woman, who is a man, and they've got in a real tangle there. Would you regret that Stonewall is going to go bump if it does?
Of course not. I mean, Stonewall are incredibly harmful. But what's happened in the UK is that we had this Supreme Court decision that there are only two sexes and that birth men should go into male wards in hospitals and birth women should go into female wards. And in prisons, birth men should go into males' prisons and birth females should go into female prisons. Now, having this ruling from the Supreme Court, he said that's completely undermined Stonewall and completely undermined their agenda. And government have actually said, oh, we're going to have to follow the Supreme Court decision. So suddenly, having all this DEI certificates are no longer fashionable. That's what's happened in this country. In the United States, Trump has just made his own edict and just getting rid of it all and stopping funding for it all right across the board. But that's not what's happened in this country. In this country, it's because of the Supreme Court ruling. But absolutely, you see, it's incredible the amount of money that government departments were giving to Stonewall. Incredible. And not only government departments, major corporations as well. Phenomenal. And for all that funding to suddenly stop basically means that Stonewall has got all their commitments and they can no longer fund their commitments. And so there's likelihood they're going to go bust. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Stonewall hitting the proverbial Stonewall. Sid, we've got to finish with sport, not just footy. We'll start off with cricket. The English cricket team got what they deserved. 4-1 against Ashes results. The has-beens that they were christened, the English players of previous generations, we're talking about, are justifiably being proved right. Why? Well, we keep mentioning baseball. And if you look at the diktat of Messrs. McCullum, Key, and Stokes, they were completely taken over by baseball. Lack of discipline. Oh, we're not bothering having a decent match on these Australian pitches with the Australian Kookaburra ball. We don't need it. We'll go straight into the first test. Absurd. And then we'll have a week off to booze. Absurd. The drinking culture goes along with go out there, lads, never mind what you do, wave your back and just bat and just enjoy yourselves. How amateur is that? That's so unprofessional. And we've got, well, whitewashed almost again.
I certainly agree with you over the booze. As far as the preparation was concerned, I think one of the problems these days is that people are playing so much more cricket. So, you've got a lot more competitions going on, and they needed a break. And to have gone out to Australia a lot earlier and had a lot more, a lot more pre-test, warm-up matches was probably just not, they just didn't have the time in the agenda to do that. So
Money, Sid, we're back to the same problem as footy. It's the money. They're being paid too much for the short game.
well, maybe, yes. Well, yes, absolutely. There is a lot of money in the short game, yeah. And just finally on the end result, you see, I think after they lost the Ashes in the first three tests, they did fight back quite well. I mean, they won the fourth test, and then in the fifth test, they put up a strong showing with getting more than 300 runs. They included Bethel in the side, which was what I said when we were talking before, that I thought Bethel should replace Pope. I liked him. I thought he was a good player. And he went ahead and produced a century. I think only one of two players, the only other player on the team to produce a century being Joe Root. So, you know, and the fact that he only came in and produced such a strong showing with the bat, and he also got at least one wicket with the ball as well, because he's not a bad bowler. He's a much better choice, I think, at number three than Pope. So he's certainly somebody who's enhanced his reputation from this tour, even if the other players, by and large, haven't.
Well, there you go. You've got one right anyway, Sid. Uh, Having said that, I'm gonna be naughty now. We're gonna move on to Crystal Palace, who you've been supporting all year and saying it's done them no harm having that many Christians in their side. Perhaps God is on their side and they're winning so many matches. Well, where was God at Macclesfield?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the key Christians have left, of course. I mean, you know, one of them retired. Eze's gone to Arsenal. Guhi is obviously still there, but likely to move very soon. It'd be quite interesting to see whether he does go to Arsenal, because apparently Arsenal want him now. And they've got 10 players at Arsenal that are meeting regularly for prayer and Bible study. So, yes, I was disappointed maybe that Crystal Palace got beaten by Macclesfield, but this is football, isn't it? I mean, and you know, you've got to say hats off to Macclesfield. Sometimes in football, the team that want it the most win over a team that's got more talent. And in a situation like that, the Macclesfield players are having the playing the game of their life. I mean, literally, this is like, it's the only time in their lives that they'll be get anywhere near playing a Premiership team. Macclesfield have never before been in the third round in their history. So it's a game of the history of the club, which the club will remember for many, many years to come. You know, the day that we got to the third round of the FA Cup and we played Crystal Palace and we beat them. They've now got a game at home against Brentford as a result, which will be interesting because we'll see what happens with that one. The likelihood is that Brentford are going to go there, treat them with respect, and slaughter them. But, well done, Macclesfield. I mean, if they can get promotion and the club does move forward, then it might be a launching pad for the club. If not, it'll just be a blip in their history, which will be remembered. But yeah, I mean, well done the Macclesfield players for just throwing everything at Crystal Palace and winning.
There you go. Helps if you Wayne Rooney's brother, I suppose, in some manner or another. That's the manager. Having said that, finally, Sid, we've got to mention Arsenal and Liverpool last weekend because you had this touchline difficulty in the 90th minute, whereby I think it was Martinelli committed the ultimate sin of seeing the opposition player writhing on the touchline. Now, this is done quite often at the end of the match to waste time. People call it professional fouling when they're tripped from behind. Oh, it's a professional foul. That's all right. He's taken a yellow card for the team. Lots of things are going on, and I put them under one banner. It's cheating. And unfortunately, Martinello, 9 out of 10 times, would have been right to throw a ball at a person wasting time. In fact, the poor fella had an injured knee, and Martinelli got admonished and duly apologised for trying to get him off the field and getting on with the game. But it's symptomatic when you have vast sums of money that things like this are inevitable, Sid. It's not the good old game that we were brought up on many years ago when there was honour and belief and good manners. That used to be cricket as well, but even that's gone down the pan. It's about time we got morality back on that football field, isn't it?
Well, I have to confess, I believe that the play acting has largely come from Europe because you see some of these European sides that we play against now, of course, in the Champions League, and you see what goes on with them. I think the Italians, frankly, have been the worst. And you see what some of them get away with, and you think, it's not surprising if some sides pick it up and think we've got to do the same. Yeah, I have to say though, I felt very sorry for Lacey, who was playing for Man United against Brighton, and coming on for the debut for Manchester United, and 18 years old and playing out of his skin. I mean, they're actually saying the best player on the pitch, creating a lot of stuff. If Man United are going to get back into this game, it'll be Lacey that'll do it for them. He then catches another player, which I thought when I saw it, I thought, well, that wasn't malicious. I mean, he was literally going for the ball and caught an opposition player, but they gave him a yellow card. I thought, well, that was harsh. And then a few minutes later, he's that he did push an opponent player, but the opposition were given the throw, and he thought, no, it wasn't their throw, it was our throw, and he sort of throws the ball down in frustration, and then he's given a yellow card again and sent off. And I thought, whoa, poor guy, poor guy. I mean, he did apologize and said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that with the ball, and and there was indiscipline, and I let myself down. But he's an 18-year-old, and I guess he'll learn from it. But that wasn't malicious play. I think we've got to draw a distinction between malicious play, where people really deserve to be sent off, and people who do something out of frustration, which frankly, I think sending him off was wrong, really wrong.
I agree. I would, of course, do that as a Man U supporter. I thought
Mm,
it was 17 actually, but it was a young lad.
mm,
And he had played before on that right wing. And he's something special. That's something to look forward to. But
mm,
I thought the referee was particularly had a bad match all the way through. The opposition were not ticked off by clearly over aggressive tackling from behind.
mm,
And then to book the lad in the first place for a completely innocuous tackle.
mm,
And if it was a decent referee, frankly, he'd have put their arms around the lad and say, we don't do things like that. You're lucky I've taken this view. You should be sent off. That was what should happen. But they're not. They follow the rule book without common sense.
yeah.
There you go. We agree on that one. Sid, it's been a joy, and you have a joy next week. And if you find time, we might even get through to your hotel room. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Cheers.